listen. It's always about what you want for Christmas.
That's not true. I'm trying to make this special for us.
The house was glowing with Christmas lights, casting a warm, golden glow across the living room. The smell of pine mixed with the sweet scent of freshly baked cookies, and a fire crackled softly in the fireplace. It should have been a perfect Christmas, the kind that filled hearts with joy and laughter. But as soon as the narrator stepped inside, a chill ran through them. Colder than the winter air outside, their son came forward, smiling politely, holding out his hand. "Glad you could make it," he said, but there was a tension in his voice, something the narrator couldn't quite place. Behind him, the young wife was standing stiffly, arms crossed. She gave a quick nod but didn't smile. Something in her eyes made the narrator's stomach twist. At first, they thought it might just be holiday stress. Perhaps she was tired or preoccupied. But the moment felt heavy, almost deliberate. They tried to shake off the unease and place the gifts under the Christmas tree. Brightly wrapped boxes, carefully chosen, meant to bring joy. Yet the warmth they expected from family wasn't there. As the evening went on, small comments started to sting. A joke fell flat, a casual remark met with a cold stare. Then, as everyone gathered around the tree, the words came. Clear, sharp, and impossible to ignore. "You don't belong here. Maybe you should just leave." The narrator froze. The room seemed to shrink, the festive lights blurring into a haze. Their heart pounded, hurt mingling with disbelief. Could she really have said that? The words echoed like a hammer on glass, shattering the peace they had hoped for. For a moment, nobody spoke. The son's face was pale, guilt flickering across his eyes, but he stayed silent. The wife's expression remained stern, almost proud of herself. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, the tension was far worse. The narrator felt every emotion at once. Shock, sadness, confusion, and a deep, aching sense of not belonging. They wanted to speak, to defend themselves, to ask what, but no words came. The lump in their throat made even a simple sentence impossible. Memories flashed through their mind. Past Christmases spent laughing together, birthdays, family dinners. How could this moment erase all of that? The warmth of those memories clashed violently with the icy rejection in front of them. Finally, after a long pause, the narrator took a deep breath and turned toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. They could hear the soft murmur of conversation behind them, the crackling fire, the jingling of a Christmas bell. And yet all of it felt distant, irrelevant. All that mattered was the sharp sting of rejection. As they reached the hallway, the narrator paused. Their hand hovered over the doorknob. Should they leave? Should they stay? The audience could feel their hesitation, the silent struggle between pride and love for the family. And then, just before turning the knob, they heard a small, almost inaudible sound, a slight rustle from the living room. Was it a misstep? A soft sigh? Or perhaps the beginning of something unexpected? The narrator's heart skipped a beat. They had walked away, but somehow the story was far from over. The cold hallway felt like a small prison. The narrator's hand lingered on the doorknob, their minds spinning with confusion. Outside, the winter wind blew against the windows, but inside, the chill came from the sting of rejection. Each step away from the living room felt heavier than the last, as if their heart were carrying an invisible weight. Once outside the room, they leaned against the wall, trying to steady their breathing. Their eyes traced the familiar ornaments on the tree through the doorway, the same ornaments they had helped hang in past Christmases. Now they looked like symbols of something they no longer belonged to. The laughter and warmth of previous years felt like memories from another life. Distant and unreachable, they began walking slowly toward the front door, hoping that stepping outside into the crisp winter air might bring clarity. Each step on the wooden floor echoed loudly, reminding them of how alone they felt. Their mind wandered to all the times they had celebrated, with the family gifts exchanged, stories shared, laughter filling the room. It seemed impossible that tonight, that sense of belonging had vanished in a single, cutting sentence. As they reached the entrance hall, a soft knock at the door caught their attention. It was a neighbor, holding a small basket of homemade cookies. "I thought you might like some treats," the neighbor said with a kind smile. The narrator accepted the basket, their hands shaking slightly. It was such a simple gesture, but in that moment it felt like a lifeline, a reminder that kindness still existed outside the walls that now felt suffocating. Carrying the cookies, they stepped onto the porch. The cold air hit their face sharply, a mixture of relief and sorrow. They leaned against the railing, letting their thoughts drift. Should they leave and avoid the tension completely? Or should they return, try to mend what had been broken in just a few words? The son's voice and the wife's harsh expression replayed over and over in their mind. Each replay brought fresh pain. Memories of past Christmases surged through them. They remembered the warmth of the fireplace, the sound of their son laughing as he opened gifts, the way the family had once felt like a safe haven. Those memories tugged at their heart, reminding them why they loved this family so deeply, despite the present hurt. The audience could feel the conflict between pride, pain, and the deep desire for connection. After a long moment of reflection, the narrator noticed a small detail they had almost missed. Through the slightly open living room door, they saw their son quietly pacing, his hands nervously fidgeting. He seemed upset, but he didn't call them back. And then the faint sound of the wife's voice, softer than before, reached their ears, not angry, but strained, almost apologetic. Something inside the narrator shifted. They realized that perhaps the conflict was not as one-sided as it seemed. Maybe, beneath the harsh words and cold exterior, there was worry, stress, or fear driving the behavior. Maybe tonight wasn't just about rejection, it was about miscommunication, unspoken emotions, and the pressure of expectations. Taking a deep breath, the narrator made a decision. They would not storm away in anger, nor would they retreat in shame. Instead, they would return inside not as someone forced to stay, but as someone willing to understand. The journey back promised uncertainty, but also the possibility of healing. Slowly, they turned from the porch and stepped back toward the door. Each step felt tentative, but with purpose. The audience could feel the tension rising, their hearts in the narrator's chest, waiting for what would happen when they re-entered the living room. The narrator's hand lingered on the doorknob, their fingers brushing against the cold metal. Every instinct screamed caution, yet something deeper pulled them forward. Slowly, they stepped back into the living room. The festive decorations twinkled warmly, but the air felt thick with tension. The son's wife was standing near the tree, her posture stiff, but now she wasn't looking at them directly. Instead, she seemed distracted, almost fragile. The narrator froze for a moment, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. Then they noticed something unusual. A small gift box had slipped from the table and was lying on the floor, slightly open. Its contents, a handmade ornament, were scattered. The wife's hand trembled as she tried to gather it, revealing a hint of emotion beneath her stern exterior. Their hearts softened. Could it be that her harsh words weren't entirely personal? Perhaps she was dealing with her own worries, pressures, or fears that had nothing to do with them. The narrator quietly stepped closer, careful not to startle her, and asked softly, "Are you all right?" The wife paused, startled by the gentle tone. For a brief moment, the room was silent except for the soft crackling of the fire. The son, who had been pacing nervously, looked on, relief flickering across his face as if he had hoped this conversation might happen. The tension in the room was palpable, but it had shifted slightly from confrontation to fragile possibility. Then, a small accident occurred. A candle on the table flickered too close to a napkin. The narrator reacted instinctively, reaching out to move it away before it could catch fire. The wife's eyes met theirs, wide with a mix of surprise and gratitude. In that instant, the wall between them seemed to crumble, just a little. It was such a simple moment, yet its significance was enormous. The narrator noticed more signs of strain, a stack of unopened mail, a half-finished Christmas card, and a small note lying on the floor, its edges crumpled. Each small detail told a story of someone overwhelmed, trying to manage expectations and keep everything perfect. It became clear that the wife's earlier words were fueled more by stress than malice. As the narrator bent down to help tidy the scattered ornament pieces, The son's wife spoke quietly, almost under her breath. "I didn't mean to. It's been so hard." Her voice trembled. For the first time that evening, the narrator heard vulnerability in her tone, a human truth that explained the sharpness of her words. The narrator smiled gently, offering reassurance through a nod and a soft, understanding word. No judgment, no anger, just empathy. The son watched, his eyes shining with unspoken gratitude, while the wife slowly relaxed, letting go of some of the tension that had weighed on her all evening. In that moment, the narrator realized something important. Sometimes rejection isn't personal, and sometimes harsh words hide a deeper struggle. The audience feels this revelation, connecting emotionally with the story. Understanding that families are complex, emotions run deep, and kindness can break through walls of tension. The narrator's next decision would be crucial. Step fully into the room and offer comfort? Wait and let the family handle it? Or step back, giving space but holding the door open for reconciliation? The uncertainty lingered, keeping viewers on edge. The narrator took a slow, steady breath and stepped fully into the living room. Every muscle in their body felt tense, but their heart was resolute. They had witnessed the cracks in the walls of hostility, the subtle signs of stress and vulnerability in their son's wife. For the first time that evening, they realized that tonight could either deepen the rift or begin healing it. The son's wife looked up, her eyes wary, but not angry. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sweater, betraying nerves she tried to hide. The narrator offered a soft smile, the kind that says, "I see you. I understand." They spoke gently, in a calm, even tone. "I know tonight has been difficult," the narrator said. "I didn't mean to make things harder, I just wanted to be here with the family." For a moment, the wife's expression faltered. Her gaze softened slightly, and the rigid tension in her shoulders eased. It was the first crack in the armor of her stern demeanor. She said nothing, but the pause was significant. The audience could feel the suspense. Would she open up, or retreat back into anger? The narrator continued carefully, not pressing too hard, but bridging the emotional gap. "I can see you've been trying so hard. Maybe we can try to enjoy the evening together?" The wife's lips trembled as she struggled to respond. The son, standing nearby, let out a quiet sigh of relief, realizing that the tension might finally begin to melt. He stepped closer, placing a supportive hand on his wife's shoulder, silently urging her to let the narrator in. Slowly, the wife nodded, and the narrator offered to help her fix the fallen ornament on the floor. Their hands brushed as they picked it up together, a small, simple gesture, yet powerful. The audience could feel the symbolism. Small acts of cooperation can heal larger wounds. As they worked together, a tiny smile appeared on the wife's face. Not a full smile, but enough to suggest that resentment was giving way to understanding. The narrator felt a cautious hope stir in their chest. Perhaps tonight could still become a Christmas remembered not for hurt, but for connection. The son spoke quietly, almost in a whisper. "I'm sorry. Mom, I should have said something earlier." His words carried sincerity and the subtle weight of regret. The wife's eyes softened further, and for the first time, she allowed herself to lean slightly toward the narrator, as if testing whether it was safe to be vulnerable. It was a turning point. The emotional walls of rejection, tension, and hurt were slowly crumbling. The room still held quiet unease, but it was no longer filled with hostility. Instead, there was potential for understanding, for forgiveness, for warmth. The narrator realized that tonight wasn't just about enduring rejection. It was about patience, empathy, and the courage to reach out despite fear. The audience could feel this subtle shift in the room, sensing that something meaningful was about to happen, just as a fragile calm settled. A sudden, unexpected sound interrupted the moment. A small crash, followed by the wife's startled gasp. A minor accident, perhaps a knocked-over ornament or a tipped mug, drew everyone's attention. It was chaotic for just a second, but in that moment, the family came together instinctively. The narrator moved quickly to help. The son grabbed a towel, and the wife's face showed genuine concern for the mess. For the others, for the shared moment. The tension dissolved, replaced by cooperation and unspoken understanding. The audience feels the suspense transform into emotional release. Asterisk. The minor accident, a small mug tipped over onto the carpet, had sent everyone momentarily into chaos. The narrator bent down, carefully blotting the spill, while the son grabbed a towel and the wife fumbled to pick up broken cookie crumbs from the floor. It seemed like a small, insignificant event, but in truth, it had shifted the energy in the room. In the midst of cleaning, a sudden flash of emotion crossed the wife's face. She dropped the towel and stepped back, her eyes welling with tears. The narrator froze, sensing something deeper than the minor mishap was surfacing. The son looked at her, his voice soft but urgent. "It's okay. You can tell me." For the first time that evening, the wife's defenses crumbled completely. She spoke quickly, words tumbling out in a mix of frustration, guilt, and sadness. "I've been so worried. I just wanted everything to be perfect for Christmas. I didn't mean to push you away. I didn't know how to handle it all." The narrator's heart softened. All the harsh words, the rejection, the icy stares, it had never been truly about them. The wife's anxiety, her pressure to create the perfect holiday, had manifested as anger and distance. Now exposed, her vulnerability was raw and real. The room fell silent, except for the crackling of the fire. The son stepped closer to his wife, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know it's been hard," he said. "But Mom is family. She's always loved us, and she's here because she cares. Let her in." The narrator smiled, feeling the weight of tension lift, even just a little. They stepped forward, extending a hand not in confrontation, but in understanding. The wife hesitated, then slowly took it. In that simple gesture, months of unspoken frustration and emotional distance began to melt. The audience could feel the catharsis. The room that had been heavy with rejection was now filled with warmth and cautious hope. The unexpected moment wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic event. It was the sudden release of truth, the breaking down of emotional walls, and the quiet, mutual acknowledgement of love and family. The son guided them both back to the living room, where the Christmas tree sparkled softly, ornaments reflecting the soft light. The wife, now more composed, picked up a small gift she had dropped earlier and handed it to the narrator. I hope you can forgive me," she said, her voice trembling. The narrator accepted the gift, feeling tears well up. "There's nothing to forgive," they said gently. "We're family, and that means being here for each other, even when things get hard." For the first time that night, laughter quietly bubbled up. It was small, hesitant, but real. The son joined in, nudging the wife playfully, and soon they were all smiling, sharing a moment that felt like the Christmases of old. Yet somehow more meaningful. The narrator realized that the night's turmoil had a purpose. The harsh words, the cold stares, even the walk to the door, they all led to this, a moment of honesty, a moment of vulnerability, and ultimately a moment of connection. The audience feels the emotional climax, heartbreak transformed into understanding, anger softened by empathy, and rejection replaced by love. Asterisk. The room was quiet now, but it was the kind of quiet filled with warmth. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, and the Christmas tree glowed softly, ornaments reflecting the golden light. The tension that had dominated the evening was gone, replaced with a fragile but real sense of understanding. The narrator looked around the room, taking in the faces of the family, the son smiling with relief, the wife, still nervous but softer, more open, and themselves finally feeling accepted again. They settled into a chair near the tree, holding the small gift the wife had handed them. It wasn't the gift itself that mattered, but the gesture behind it. The wife, now seated nearby, hesitated for a moment, then offered a small, genuine smile. It wasn't forced, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. The narrator could feel the tension of the night melting away, replaced by connection and empathy. The son joined them, sitting down and taking a deep breath. "I know tonight was hard," he said quietly, "but I think we all needed this, to see what really matters." He glanced at his wife, who nodded slightly, her eyes glistening. The narrator felt a surge of emotion. These moments, simple and small, were more meaningful than any perfectly decorated tree or elaborate dinner. As the evening continued, they shared stories from past Christmases, laughing softly at forgotten mishaps and old memories. The narrator realized that the harsh words, the walk to the door, and the tense moments were all part of the story, a story that led to this moment of honesty and connection. Each person had been tested by emotions and expectations, but in the end, patience, understanding, and empathy had prevailed. The wife, still a little shaky, spoke quietly. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted everything to be perfect. But now I see that it's not about perfection. It's about being together. The narrator reached out and gently held her hand. Exactly, they said. Family is about being together through the good times and the hard times. The son added, this Christmas will be remembered differently, not for arguments, but for understanding, for realizing that love and kindness are stronger than pride or anger. The room filled with quiet nods and smiles, the atmosphere soft and full of warmth. The narrator leaned back and reflected on the night. They thought about how easy it can be to misunderstand one another, to let small stresses and unspoken fears drive people apart. But they also realized how powerful compassion and patience can be. One gentle word, one small gesture of understanding had turned what could have been a night of hurt into a night of connection and healing. Outside, the snow fell softly, blanketing the world in white. Inside, hearts had been warmed by a lesson far more valuable than any gift under the tree. The narrator felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for reconciliation, but for the reminder that family, no matter how complicated, is worth the effort. As the night came to a close, they all stood together near the tree, exchanging quiet smiles, small hugs, and unspoken promises to cherish each other more. The narrator knew that this Christmas would stay with them forever, a reminder that even in moments of rejection or tension, understanding and empathy can transform hearts.